Hiring in 2026? You're not alone, and competing for top talent is only getting tougher. That's why Robert Half's 2026 Salary Guide combines real-world salary data with recruiter insights, helping you make competitive offers that seal the deal. Backed by decades of recruiter expertise and proprietary AI, Robert Half knows what it takes to build a compensation strategy that works in your market. Explore the guide at roberthalf.com/SHRM. At Robert Half, we know talent.
What we haven't seen yet, what humanity hasn't seen yet, is there's, a little over 8 billion of us. Human, superhuman collective intelligence, or human super collective intelligence. Basically, all of us, regular humans, but knowing how to work together, we could solve everything. We could solve absolutely everything together. Picture a team facing a tangled, high-stakes problem. Too many voices, not enough clarity, and a deadline that won't budge. They've tried standard workshops. They've tried AI tools on the side. Still, the signal gets lost in the noise. Now imagine the same tool with a different rhythm. They open with a shared goal and clear roles. They diverge to explore, then cluster to find patterns, synthesize what matters, and decide confidently. Along the way, AI is present, but it's not in charge. A quiet facilitator that reframes questions, checks facts, and surfaces scenarios without drowning out human judgment. The conversation moves faster, the thinking is sharper, and the output is something that the team can actually act on. That rhythm has a name: vibe teaming. It isn't another tool to install. It's a way to work. And like any craft, it's all about the beginning, the middle, and the end. I'm joined by our guest, Jacob Taylor, a fellow at the Center for Sustainable Development at the Brookings Institution. He'll be our guide to understanding vibe teaming in plain terms. We'll walk through the anatomy of a session, how to prep, who to bring, the tools and space you'll need, and the step-by-step flow during the meeting. And with that, we'll cover the wider topics that are important as well. And finally, we'll share what to do with the outputs, how to measure success, how to iterate or scale. And if you're ready to move from theory to practice, this episode is in your playbook. Jacob, welcome to the AI+HI project.
Thank you, Nicole. So happy to be here.
I am so excited to have you because I've been following your research for a long time, and we've been at a couple of the same events together. And I think your focus on teams and vibe teaming and how do humans really work together in the age of AI is essential. So thank you for coming. We're going to jump right into part one, which is sort of the what and the why. So for anyone in our audience who is new to it, what is vibe teaming in simple terms? And how does it differ from what people are already doing with ChatGPT or your typical AI-assisted workflow and traditional team facilitation?
Well, thanks, Nicole. Vibe teaming in simple terms is a way to fuse teamwork and AI tools in a way that gets the best out of both. And so earlier this year, a famous software developer, Andrej Karpathy, announced on Twitter, on X, that coding is dead, and now it's about vibe coding, which is really a new way of working with AI tools that can, you can just talk to these models and they can produce back something tangible in terms of software code. Vibe teaming is really just taking that and applying it to teams. Like, how do we integrate these tools in ways that really elevate the best of human-to-human collaboration?
And I want to just double click on that really fast. Why is that important? Can you share a little bit also about some of the research that we've both been seeing on, what's not working with AI and teams, and why is vibe teaming, what does it even matter?
Great question, Nicole. I think the key with vibe teaming for me is that we're talking about a way to really elevate humans in teams working together. A lot of what I see at the moment in the way that AI tools are framed is framing it as an individual to tool relationship. So one person interacting with a chatbot or ChatGPT in some form. And in that context, I think it's also framing AI as an oracle for intelligence. I think vibe teaming really flips that and frames the humans as the oracles of collective intelligence and the tools as assistants and teammates in that journey of human to human collaboration. And I think that's really the balance we need to have when we're talking about incorporating AI tools into the way we work, the way our societies function.
Yeah, one of the things that really caught my attention was the research that came out a few weeks ago, where people were teams that were really in that individual, they'd been using AI individually, and then they came together as a team, and they were using it as a team the same way they used it individually, more or less. And they thought that they were more productive, but they were actually less productive. And so there's a change to how we work with AI that's required. What are your thoughts on that? What have you seen in the research sort of marketplace?
I think that that general direction is what we're seeing is that in a scenario where we're pairing using tools on an individual level, there's a big risk of cognitive offloading, as a term that's coming up at the moment, where you kind of individuals are offloading a lot of the skills that they would usually take on themselves to an AI tool. While that can increase efficiency, I think the risk here is that we might be losing some of the key capabilities that make us human, that lead to innovation and so on. And so I think in that context, the key is to figure out ways where we can keep working with these tools in a way that keeps those human dimensions of intelligence really fresh and vibrant. I think we all know that the best learning and flow and performance comes when we stretch our human capabilities, when we really test ourselves to our limits. And so what I'm interested in finding ways of combining teaming and AI so that we're stretching on both sides. We're getting team stretch to the edges of what we know and what we can do together. And then the tools are also working as hard as they can to support that.
Yeah, I was one of the things that shocked me about that paper was that the people thought they were more productive, but they actually took longer
Interesting.
and the quality was less. And it really was because they weren't. I think part of it is that, in our society and in our organizations, we don't, how to actually team
Mm,
is not taught like the way that it's taught in, military and high
right.
performing context. So we don't teach people how to team. And so there's a bell curve on teaming. And so there's high performing teams and there's terrible teams. And most teams are in the mediocre middle. And then you take AI, you throw it on top of it, and you don't actually have a process, which we're about to go into, everyone, on how to get the most out of the AI. And so people are thinking they're more productive as a team, but really they're not, because they're not vibe teaming, I would say. So okay, all right. Well, let's move on, and we can come back to that at the end. But I think this is, for organizations, like how teams work with AI is the question of 2025 and 2026. Okay, so you're going into a session. Um, Before the session and you're prepping, or a team is prepping, what kind of problems are actually a strong fit for vibe teaming and which are poor candidates?
Great question, Nicole. I think what we've found so far when we've been experimenting with this approach this year is that it helps when we have a small team with a clearly defined goal and output. So I'm an anthropologist of team performance by training, and what we learn there is there's a bit of an upper limit on teams of around five to six people in a team who can have a live conversation and iterate on the run. So that's a great group size for vibe teaming, and in that you'll have diverse perspectives on the problem. But it helps if the problem is clearly defined and there's an output that you're working toward. I mean, at Brookings here, we work on the world's toughest challenges, from ending extreme poverty to, fighting environmental degradation and so on. What we try to do is find very kind of targeted ways to chip away at those issues and then bring teams together around that. And that's core to what we do. But in organizations, in teams that are driving towards specific goals, pick something that you can all work on together and then a kind of an actionable product at the end of it that you're trying to create together.
Okay. And then, so in that team of 5 or 6, who needs to be on that team? Do the roles get assigned? And what sort of tools and environment do you set up before you start?
Great. So typically, we have found success when 1 or 2 people in the team have ownership over the collective goal, and that helps just because you can get into a dynamic then as a team where if 1 or 2 people are owning that problem, then the other people in the team can help them tease out the different dimensions of it. So you can get into a conversation, a brainstorming conversation where you're trying to really push the boundaries of what we know about the issue. If we're trying to develop, say, a 3-year business strategy, or in our case, what we published earlier this year was a 5-year strategy to end extreme poverty. We sat down with a foremost expert, Homi Karas, 40 years of experience on this issue. We sat down with him in a group of 3, a team of 3, and just said, Homi, tell us everything you know about this and tell us what people don't understand enough about this. And it was through that conversation that we developed kind of the contours of a strategy. And then that was our first input into the AI model.
Oh, so interesting. Oh boy. Okay. I want to talk to you about collective intelligence, but I'm going to stay on track. So before a team starts,
Yeah.
how should they define success for a session? Like, you kind of described how you got to your first AI input for extreme poverty, but like, is it specific decisions, a short list of actions, synthesized perspectives, and then how do we make sure everybody stays on the same page and it's visible to everyone?
Okay. Well, so maybe first, Nicole, I should break down those steps and the inputs to vibe teaming. I touched on it just now that step number 1 is having a conversation as a team, having a meeting, put it on a calendar, meet in person. And step number 1 is to record and transcribe that conversation that we're having. As I said, it's best if that is targeted at a discrete output, like a strategy, a memo, a PowerPoint deck, a new website, some kind of tangible output. And then basically the goal is to really like workshop and brainstorm that as a human team, humans to humans. But the idea is the AI tools are there as a teammate, just recording the conversation. The next step then is to feed that transcript into a model. We do a lot of work to customize and configure our AI models using just off-the-shelf tools like ChatGPT and others. But really the spirit here is this is an ongoing drafting iterative process. This is not press a button and give me the answer AI. It's, okay, let's bring an AI teammate in, give them this rich human-to-human conversation that we just had, and see how this dance with the AI tools can help us move our problem solving and thinking forward. And what we find is that when teams have that first experience of saying, okay, here's a 30-minute transcript, an hour-long meeting transcript, what can you help us shape in terms of a tangible product? We get a lot of that, wow, this model really listened to us. It's captured our perspectives. Oh, that's great. I didn't think about that. And so that initial spark of kind of dynamic interaction with the model, I think, has been a key element to keeping people motivated and engaged in this process.
Wow, wonderful. And one of the things I've heard people talk about is, over reliance on AI and drift. And so when you're setting this up, like, what are the ground rules that everybody comes into it knowing?
Great. So 3 big things. One is and the headline here is it's humans all the way down for me. So, and that is a good through line on this, that at every step, if you're not prioritizing human judgment, human expertise, just even like the way you set up your team, human values of connection and making space for each other to share perspectives, then the AI can only do so much. And so three things we try to emphasize here is, number one, rich human input as a first, rich human content as a first input, then iterating and coaching the AI, keeping it on track, which is a lot of work that we find at the moment. And then finally, when we get to an output, having human eyes over the quality of that. So there's a quality control factor at the end, so that we're not drifting or letting hallucinations or inaccuracies filter into the work.
Got it. Okay. So we've done our prep. We've got a good problem. We've got the right people in the room. We have defined success. We've put down the ground rules, and now we are in the session. Can you walk our audience through what is in the session? What's the basic flow of a vibe session? And explain how you would structure it.
Right. So typically a vibe teaming session evolves in two parts. One is just setting the kind of baseline of what we know together. And so the key questions there for us are like, what are we trying to do? How are we doing it, and why? So that's a kind of what, how, why conversation. And so if we're trying to develop a strategy for ending extreme poverty, or if you're trying to develop a next quarter's business plan, let's figure out what our goals are. How do we measure them, and why are we measuring these? Why are we aiming at these goals? And then that kind of helps gather or surface all the diverse perspectives on an issue that we're facing as a team. And then in the second half of a vibe teaming session, we usually try to get more specific about, and those questions are there more around like who, where, and when, so who do we need to bring into this conversation, or, this strategy? Where do we need to begin, and by when do we need to get this stuff done? So it becomes more of a concrete, transforming that surfacing mode into more of a, okay, who needs to do what by when, and how are we getting this done? So it kind of shifts gears.
Is that the diverge, cluster, synthesize, divide, decide sort
I
of
think
setup?
so.
Okay.
Yeah, in our language here at the Center for Sustainable Development of Brookings, we run a lot of teams, virtual and in person. We use surface, refine, and then test or plan. And so it's just very similar, I think, to your words.
Mm-hmm. Surface, refine, test, and plan. I like that. And for the surface, refine, test, and plan, what are the types of prompts that you use?
Well, I think I usually tend to go to those questions, those kind of the who, the what, how, and why first. And then the who, where, and when. And I think we've developed our own kind of internal jargon, and I think that's good. We really want to. This is all about bringing off-the-shelf tools to existing teams that have their own cultures and ways of working. And as I said, the priority for us is like, start with the human, start with your team and its values and special kind of identity, and then use that as a basis for figuring out how you want to work together and prompt and discuss. But honestly, the best prompts are ones where we're in our teams where they're really like pushing each other to the edge of what they know. So, what's the one thing that people don't understand enough about this issue? Or if you had a magic wand, like how would you help unlock progress on this problem that we're facing? Those kind of things where really what we're trying to tease out is the implicit information that humans have. We are so intelligent as creatures, but we're so unaware of what we know. We have so much embodied intelligence, and that really applies to teams as well. And so if you can get an environment where you're teasing that out together as a team, that's really team flow. That's team click and collective intelligence there. So that's what we're trying to bottle.
And that really makes a lot of sense too, because like one of the things we've seen in the marketplace, and one of the great things about being at SHRM is that we actually see, depending on proximity, hundreds up to thousands of companies who are experimenting and implementing and bringing AI in. And so we get to see the determinants of success and the determinants of failure. And one of the things that's happening is that when people just leave it at the off the shelf, they very quickly look just like their competitors who have also left it at off the shelf. You only really get to ROI when you make it context, culture, and customer. And what you just said about, not only do individuals have a lot of implicit understanding that they don't realize that they know how to do, teams have it too. And if you really want to get the most out of these tools to drive the business, lead your market, then you actually have to, like, it's a big loss to not capture the implicit team insight. And you actually really need that to differentiate.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, the way to the really customizing, making these tools your own is so important, and we find that with these tools that we configure, like out of the box tools like Anthropic, ChatGPT, you can configure these like customized models on the back end. Dive into that process, make it your own, be creative. It's probably more art than science at this point to figure out what works for your team. And I think that's the route to value and effectiveness so far for me.
Cool. So one last question in this section, and I'm asking for a friend. What about the introverts?
Yes. Oh my God. Great question. And I still haven't figured out if I'm an introvert or an extrovert, just, to be fully transparent, but,
Maybe ambivert.
yeah, maybe.
Depends on the day.
Depends on the day, depends on the situation. And I think that's key as well. So, I think there's certainly a way to do asynchronous vibe teaming to capture rich individual input and feed that into a team system. I think, I think it's like really important to figure out how the humans in your team want a team, prioritize the human connection and foster a healthy team culture, and then bring the tools to that format. And so the best teams are not teams that are one size fits all. And I know this from background in professional sport and elite teaming as a rugby player, but the best teams are teams where every individual sees themselves in that team and has a space for their individuality in the team. And I think when you use that kind of principle, there's space for all verts, extra, intro, ambi, and so on.
Great. Okay, I agree with you. So the session's over. What do we do with the output? What happens next?
Great. So by the time the session's over, typically we can run a vibe teaming session in 90 minutes. So you have about 45 minutes of rich human conversation, about 25 minutes of feeding that into the model. And then when you put that first transcript into the model, you are then keep recording your reaction. Sit down as a team with one or two computers and keep that reaction to the first output recorded as a new feed into the next iteration of drafting. So it's really this ongoing loop of human input folding into the model, and then hopefully by the end of that time, you've got a kind of a first draft, a second draft of what you're trying to produce together. It's a 5-year strategy, it's a blog, it's a PowerPoint deck for a presentation. And then that's when we then use that to create value, like use that to forge action in your team, like take it to your supervisor, take it to another team and get their response. And kind of, I guess that's the hope, is that by the end of a 90-minute session, you have something that's tangible and actionable that you can use to do your job and get value out of your teams and organization.
Great. I love folding into it, folding it in, folding it in, folding it in. And so I really want to, like, I organized an event called Healing Innovation. And the idea was that what if the next great innovation is healing? And how can we heal innovation so that it can, the things that are a little off about it now, that we could use AI to transform. And so I'm going to vibe team with the group on that. But now let's go to your and my favorite topic, collective intelligence. How do we know? How do we see that vibe teaming? How do we know if vibe teaming and this 90-minute sessions folded in on one another, if it's lifted the team's collective IQ, like the collective intelligence?
So far in my experimentation, it's really been about people telling me and thinking, wow, okay, I felt like what we did there was really stretched our team intelligence. And so far it's anecdotal, but we are working on ways to quantify that kind of feeling of the team increasing its collective intelligence. There's a lot of great research coming out. Christoph Riedel at Northeastern, a colleague of mine, we're working on building a model of what it would look like to actually measure collective intelligence of teams while they're interacting with AI tools. And at the moment, we're kind of breaking it down.
Ooh, I can't do. Oh, keep going, keep going,
Okay,
keep going.
Well, I mean, the current idea at the moment is you can break down collective intelligence into 3 parts. And this is, it reduces the richness a little bit, but here it is. So layer 1 is what we know together. Like, what is the knowledge that we have across a team? But knowledge is not enough to be intelligent, right? You want to actually also then level up on that and focus on the right knowledge to take action. So, of all the stuff we know together, you and I, Nicole, we know a universe of stuff. What are we focusing on together so that we can be intelligent together? And then finally, it's like, what are we doing to take action on what we know together? So what behaviors in the team are we exhibiting where we're like, okay, we're going to do this, not that, and I'm going to bring these resources to bear, and we're all bought in. So there's a 3-layer model that we're working on here, and we think that with AI tools now and meeting transcripts, there's a real opportunity to measure and create a metric of collective intelligence in teams using this 3-part model of shared knowledge, shared attention, and shared action.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you because that sort of mediocre middle, which a lot, I think it's a bell curve. Like most teams are in there. Um, you know, what our society needs. We have real issues across work, health, and our cities. And AI certainly it reduces cost, but it also reduces friction. But also this third thing about what are we creating? I think we finally have a real opportunity to solve intractable problems that have been sort of like, plaguing our communities in terms of health, work, and the places that we live. And so we need the creativity of human beings working together. And so, I think one of the reasons why, all these teaming and like, teams are not working as well as you think studies are coming out is because, the last 2 years we did all this stuff to figure out like, how does it really work for an individual to succeed with AI? And so we got there's some good models out there. We have, I think, those of us in research, those of us who are watching, also the stellar companies, we kind of got it figured out, and now it's really about, uh, um, studying that more and distributing that understanding across companies and just, business, education, et cetera. The next big area is really how do humans work together, whether it's in a company or a community, and how do we really leverage AI to help us do that? And so, I expect over the next year and a half to 2 years, we'll make the same progress that we made over the last 2 years for individual productivity. But it is the question of the age. And so I'm so glad that you're working on this. My last question for you is if you were really sort of imagining, so I know you're a researcher, so you can't say, without having studied it, but I love that prompt that they used to have a series of books called "What Do You Believe Is True But You Can't Yet Prove." What do these teams look like? Like, what are the new ways of designing teams and organizations that AI might provide that you think is possible? Though I know that you're in the process of doing the research, but what might this unlock?
Very happy to to conjecture here, Nicole. I love it, visioning what's possible. I imagine a world where small tight-knit teams of 4 or 5 are free and autonomous to like get at the problems that they have, and that there might be an AI intermediary layer that helps connect teams with teams. So you're getting this kind of network of teams that are flexibly, pursuing high impact work that makes sense in an organization, but also beyond that. And this is where the collective intelligence comes in for cities, societies, ecosystems, is like, if we can get that matchmaking function right between highly autonomous, high performing teams and set it up in a way where humans reap the benefits, people, communities, really have a stake and equity in these systems, not just the big companies, then I think that's the vision that I'm fighting for. And I think it's very possible with these wave of tools.
Yeah. And, so for everyone in the audience, it's like human decision-making at scale, human collective intelligence. We all know that email is not it. And neither is Slack and neither is Asana. And they're great companies, but like this real thing for those of you who have been on a team and you somehow, you did more than you imagined. The way that it felt, what you created, like most of, I hope that everyone who's in the audience has had that experience at least once. And so what I'm excited about with AI is the potential for that to be something that everyone can have, and we can do it, at will. We know how to do it. There's norms. People are taught how to team in an AI environment, et cetera. So that's what I'm hoping for. And and my last thing before we'll, close it out is that, everyone, there's a lot of concern about advanced super intelligence, and sort of like, AI becoming sentient and that kind of thing. I think for us, what we haven't seen yet, what humanity hasn't seen yet, is there's, a little over 8 billion of us, superhuman collective intelligence, or human super collective intelligence. Basically, all of us, regular humans, but knowing how to work together, we could solve everything. We could solve absolutely everything together. And so that's why I love your research. And I will always, 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 elevate and support, the work that you're doing, because it's the next most important thing. And that's it for this week's episode. A big thank you to Jacob for sharing your experiences and insights with us. Thanks for joining the conversation, everyone, and we'll catch you next time.
Did you know our podcast is only one part of the AI+HI project? We also host an annual event featuring visionaries from the worlds of business, tech, and HR. Plus, we publish a weekly newsletter that includes topical articles and the latest research from SHRM, all to help you stay ahead of the trends. To sign up, just make your way to shrm.org/AI+HI. And you can also follow SHRM on social media for even more clips and stories. Like, share, and tell us how you're innovating towards a brighter future.
In today's hiring market, 88% of candidates negotiate pay. Be 100% ready to seal the deal. Get the 2026 salary guide at roberthalf.com/SHRM. Robert Half knows talent.
SHRM.